Welcome to Disrupting Peace, a show about why peace hasn't worked and how it still could. I'm Bridget Conley, Research Director at the World Peace Foundation. This season, we're looking at examples of resistance from 6 countries to see what we can learn. Scholars, activists, and politicians will help us understand how leaders attempt to concentrate power and how people fight back. Now, sustaining a democracy often looks mundane. It includes managing different stakeholders, crafting policy, debating nuances, and compromising. Ending a democracy can be dramatic. And it almost happened on December 3rd, 2024, when the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, attempted to declare martial law during a televised address. In this episode, we'll hear a first-hand account of what happened on the ground that night. We're speaking with Ji-ho Cha, a member of the South Korean parliament and the opposition Democratic Party. By training, he's a physician and has worked in global health and humanitarian affairs. We'll also be joined by Myung-hee Lee, an expert on authoritarian politics, democratization, protest, and foreign policy in East Asia. She's an assistant professor of political science at Michigan State University. Together, we'll discuss how a political opposition can successfully overturn a president's power grab. We'll look back to the night of December 3rd and hear how politicians, citizens, and even soldiers came together to protect democracy. Ji-ho, Myung-hee, welcome to Disrupting Peace.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as well.
So, as background for our audience, obviously the two of you know this. On December 3rd, 2024, the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, declared martial law during a televised address. The president accused the opposition of being engaged in anti-state collaborations with North Korea, and he prohibited political activities, suspended the National Assembly, and curbed freedom of the press. He reportedly also issued arrest warrants against leading members of the political opposition, and even some within his own political party, the People Power Party. Ji-ho, as a member of parliament, you played a key role in the immediate response to martial law. Can you tell us what happened that night?
Sure, I'm on the way back to my home just before the highway, and I got the call from my senior staff, and then he mentioned of the declaration of the martial law. So I was a bit frozen for 1 or 2 minutes. I never imagined it can happen in my hometown and democratized society. And so I was frozen, and then I decided to be back to National Assembly. And then the National Assembly building was already surrounded by the police. And so I knew I had to enter and then join to the hall and to make my vote to stop it. And so I climbed the wall behind of the National Assembly and rushed into our voting hall.
You climbed a wall on the back of the National Assembly building?
Yes. The wall I climbed was actually wall of the National Assembly's the kindergarten for our kids. That nursery kindergarten was just next to the ground, where the military helicopter was landed. And so if I climbed the wall a bit late, I could be caught as a first member of the National Assembly.
And was the hope that once you had a certain number of parliamentarians come back, that you could vote to overturn the declaration? Was that the goal?
Yeah, that was goal, because by the constitutional law, the president can declare a martial law and National Assembly can stop it. If we vote more than the 150 members, and then it can stop. So it's why we lost it into the National Assembly, and also President Yoon, why he tried to dispatch the soldier to arrest and detain us.
So the members of parliament were rushing back to the National Assembly to vote. Can you say more about how everyday Korean citizens and soldiers were responding?
When we had to wait for our colleague to join, the citizens rushed to the National Assembly to protect us outside of the wall. Our staff and then citizen try to block with the human ban. And also there is the resistance inside the armies, young armies, and they try to not too much actively engage on this kind of situation. So I was surprised. Each soldier, young soldiers, they wanna violent to the our staff. And so I think those kind of the democratic consensus already built it inside. Whatever their job is, a soldier or police or national assemblyman or woman, those kind of democratic principles are internalized inside ourselves. So there is active resistance inside.
Let's pause Jiho's story about what happened the night of the martial law declaration, because I want to ask you, Myung-hee, to provide us some background. For listeners who aren't aware, what exactly is martial law?
When there is a state emergency, the president has the power to declare martial law. And under the martial law, some of these like democratic activities can be restricted. In South Korean case, even under martial law declaration, the National Assembly, the legislature's activities cannot be restricted. That is protected by the Constitution. So the president, his action was certainly very unconstitutional because the first clause of the proclamation of martial law was restricting the National Assembly's activities. And South Korea was not going through a severe crisis, so it was not justifiable.
Can I ask you personally, when you first heard about the martial law declaration, were you surprised?
I was really surprised. It was my last week of the semester, so I did not have any class that day. It was morning in Michigan here in the US. I was like casually browsing my Facebook page, and all of a sudden someone posted a post on Facebook saying martial law in South Korea, and I was like, this must be a joke. And then I went to YouTube and I found out that like Yoon Suk Yeol was actually declaring the martial law. So I was kind of really surprised by that. And social media was, on fire after that.
The declaration, it was shocking, but it's not unprecedented in Korean history. When was the last time that martial law was declared, and what happened?
The last one was declared in 1979 after the assassination of the dictator Park Chung-hee. And then that martial law was expanded in 1980 by another dictator, Chun Doo-hwan, who came to power through a coup. Under that 1980 martial law, Gwangju massacre was occurred. So a lot of civilians in a city called Gwangju were killed by the military. They were peaceful protesters, but Chun Doo-hwan sent the military to suppress the protest movement there. And this time, the martial law declared by Yoon was a surprise to many people because South Korea was democratized in 1987. And ever since then, South Korea was becoming more and more democratic. Right now, it's a presidential democracy. Like the US, there are checks and balances between three different branches, right? So this is the reason why this declaration of martial law is happened, because the president, Yoon Suk Yeol, cannot accept the fact that the parliament is checking his power.
I was asking about the last time martial law was declared, because obviously that's within our lifetimes. And so there's living memory within a large section of the population. And Jiho, probably you might have some memories of that last declaration as well.
Actually, I was born in that period of the last martial law, so it is long time ago. But many of my colleagues, in the National Assembly, and especially in the Democratic Party, they actually had engaged in the democratic movement in that period. And then after that period in the 1980s and the early 90s, and then there are lots of the blood in this process, and their colleague and then the friends was detained, and some of them are killed. And so it is traumatic memory. We have a historical trauma on the martial law, but it happened again. And in the society we believe we are fully advanced, democratized. Our lesson is that this kind of martial law or another state violence can happen even in the most democratized society.
So let's return to the night of the martial law declaration. Jiho, once you felt it was safe to leave Parliament, what did you do next?
Actually, I stayed in the building more than one month.
A
And
month.
more than once. And because if there is something happen, our guideline is to get back to the voting hall and within 20 minutes or at least 30 minutes. But my district and my house is more than 1 hours and 30 minutes away from the National Assembly. So I had to stay in my office. Not only for me, my senior staff, secretaries, they also stayed together in the office. So we stayed and worked and eat everything in the National Assembly.
Wow. What was going on in the street? You talked about younger soldiers, but also young people who were out there.
Yeah,
Who were those people?
from the teenager to the early 30s, and mostly women. They was always the part of our political leading group, but not the dominant group. But in this case, is the young woman have been the main actor to protect our democracy. And as you may see the social media, our protest culture is so like a concert, and then we are singing and dancing, and even in the first nights when I stayed in the National Assembly, and I walk around each corner of the National Assembly 2 or 3 a.m. When I walk to the each gate of the National Assembly, each gate was protected by these teenagers and early 20s, the woman, and then I was feel safe and secured. And because of this movement was so strong, and then I feel the emotionally also politically we are connected in this based on this solidarity.
Why do you think it was young women in particular?
So there is many interpretation. In Korean society, women are still discriminated. Last presidential election or last general election, far right group, they try to split men and women. So the young movement was divided, and young women are much more pro democracy. But I don't like this kind of division because we are mixed. Many young and old males join, and then we are shout together and singing together on this situation. Actually, it was very fun, and it is very peaceful, and they hesitate to leave that protest because it was very fun.
Youngie, do you also have any insights on the protest movement or the pro-democracy movement that hit the streets that night?
Oh, I was also very impressed and surprised by these like really young women in their 10s and 20s marching, singing on the street. They are singing K-pop songs. So it's really amazingly vibrant protest environment. I see hope there. Yeah. In this young generation.
So you do research on the political right in South Korea, and that's part of the president's party. Can you talk about who his supporters are and why they voted for him? What did they like about him?
So one old person's response was really resonating with me. It was a few hours after the lifting of the martial law, she basically told me that when she heard the story that the President Yoon Suk Yeol was declaring the martial law, she was excited. She was relieved, like a heavy load was off her mind. That's her reaction to me. I was really surprised. So basically, she told me that, she had been very upset about the opposition parties blocking of president's ways. And, the president had to do something to break the situation through. So that was really surprising in a way. But if I'm, remembering my research about these far-right groups, then it's not really surprising because most of them, these people are older generation. They are in their 70s and 80s, and they went through, most of those authoritarian period in South Korea. So they think that the dictators in South Korea, they are national heroes. They modernized and developed South Korea in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. What's interesting is that for these older generation, dictators' achievements are their life achievements. So anything that rejects these dictators' legacies, for them, it's the rejection of their own life achievements.
So some older citizens had a positive reaction to the martial law declaration?
So what's interesting is like President Yoon his approval rating was really bad before the declaration of martial law. Like it was like 20%. But then after the declaration of martial law and the parliament is impeaching President Yoon, all of a sudden, like a lot of older people try to support him, try to keep him in office. So for these older people, they are not mere supporters of a particular political figure. They are trying to protect some authoritarian legacies represented by these political figures.
Yeah. Young-hee, so obviously, and Korea is far from alone in facing aggressive attempts to concentrate power in the hands of an executive. It's a trend that's rising globally. So speaking for the U.S., do you think there's anything we can learn about how Korea responded?
That's a hard question. Yeah, but that's also a very good question. So the rise of the far-right movement is everywhere right now in Western democracies, all of these much established democracies, and they are electing authoritarian figures as their presidents, as their leaders, and these leaders are eroding democratic institutions from within. So that kind of phenomenon is everywhere, and it's very concerning. For the South Korean case, we can see hope in people. So people are gathering on the street. They are fighting for democracy. And especially these younger people, younger women around the world, we also see a lot of anti-far-right movements, right? And in the US, you see a lot of this like solidarity movement. They are standing in solidarity with like immigrants, minorities, LGBTQ people. So people have power and people can really make changes.
So that's the perfect transition into our final formal question. And it's a question that I ask every guest, and we call it collective dreaming. So between 1980, the previous time a Korean president declared martial law, in 2024, 45 years passed. So if we start thinking another 45 years into the future, imagine South Korean democracy is strong, it's resilient and responsive, and the country has become a regional leader in peace building and democratization. So what do we need to do now in our lifetimes so that we get there?
I think like we should pay attention to politics right? Politics is a headache. Like when these kind of situations are occurring, so people do not want to engage in politics. They do not pay attention to political news. But, we need to pay attention to politics. We have to keep ourselves informed, and then we have to wield our power. That is a way for us to make changes and preventing these events from happening again. And also legislators like Jiho, if we are voting for them, they should be accountable voters. So I think like that mechanism should be working for maintaining like democratic system in countries.
Jiho, how would you answer this question? So we've got 45 years to get to this really strong, wonderful place. How do we get there?
I think we are now on the great transformation driven by the AI and digital tech, and also driven by the global crisis from the climate to the pandemic or etc., which impact a lot on our economy and also impact a lot on our culture and connection in between the people. So we're in the crossroad in between on the one hand AI or digital democracy, on the other hand digital autocracy. There are lots of the surveillance tech and monitoring tech. It can impact a lot on our political life. AI tech, it can impact a lot on our voting behavior. Some kind of small engineer group can impact the election result around the world. But on the other hand, hope is that the new way of the connectivity. So in the Korean case, is the young women are gathered based on the digital democratic connection and new type of the digital solidarity. Language barrier will disappear using the AI. The culture exchange is much more direct in between the people, and we build up the much better connectivity with the people living in the sub-Saharan Africa, Korea, US, and we have a new platform to be connected. So it's a time to mobilize this kind of new flow into more democratic manner.
Thank you very much. Until then, another 45 years, we'll see how we can channel those tools to support democracy rather than to undermine it and to help us respond to the very real threats.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jiho. Thank you, Myung-hee. Your insights were incredible. So I want to thank you both for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for moderating everything so perfectly.
Thank you so much.
We recorded this conversation in early February 2025. Since then, a slow legal battle has been playing out. For now, President Yoon Suk Yeol is under arrest on charges of orchestrating a rebellion and resisting arrest. Separately, the Constitutional Court is considering whether he should be removed from office. A lot is still up in the air. Underneath this unfolding political drama, Jiho and Myung-hee gave us insights into issues that transcend this context. We heard stories about a power grab, of clashing generational and gendered expectations of government, and about the need to harness new powerful communication tools towards solving problems rather than protecting vested interests. South Korea is far from alone in facing these issues. Overall, I leave this interview inspired and hopeful. Jiho and his colleagues took enormous risks to preserve the normal functioning of democracy. Young people took to the street in joyful and peaceful protests that refused to cede ground to a power grab. This is undoubtedly a perilous moment, but South Korea shows that presidential overreach is not the end of the story. Thanks for listening to Disrupting Peace. I'm Bridget Conley. You can find out more about Myung-hee Lee's work on her Michigan State University page, and we've got the link in our show notes. Find out more about Jiho Cha's work on his LinkedIn page, and his name is spelled Jihocha. Next week on Disrupting Peace, we're looking at how Syrians are rebuilding their country in the wake of dictatorship and war.
There's a difference between the mentality of a revolution and the mentality of a state building. A few days after the takeover of Damascus, there were a few protests demanding an inclusive and democratic government. But I think, at least from what I see, is that these people have realized that I don't need to protest this at this moment. I can just go and talk to those in power and tell them what I want.
Disrupting Peace is a production of the World Peace Foundation. Find out more at worldpeacefoundation.org. We've moved from X to Blue Sky, where you can find us at worldpeacefdtn.bsky.social. You can also find us on Instagram at worldpeacefdtn. The show is produced by myself and Emily Shaw. Engineering by Jacob Winnick and Asia Simpson. Marketing and social media by Emily Room. Show artwork by Simon Fung. Special thanks to Jeremy Helton and my colleagues, Lisa Avery, B. Arneson, Alex Duvall, and the team from the Tufts Digital Design Studio, including Kimberly, Lynn, Forero-Arnias, and Miles Donovan. Okay, until next time, stay skeptical and hopeful.